My friends, it's the next day in the saga of this 0018, and you can see it looks a whole lot better after that hot water bath I gave it yesterday. You know, it's amazing what a little soap and water will do. It could still use it in a place or two, but it's not too bad now. What I'm trying to decide is how far to take this. That's always the answer or the question on any kind of restoral like this. It's how far should I go? How far does it need to go? Unfortunately, I kind of think this one needs to go pretty far. You know, wood has a memory, and once it gets that memory, which, and if you don't know what I mean by that, it's once it takes a shape. You know, it doesn't matter what that shape is, but once it takes that shape, it don't like to give it up. Like, for instance, if you just think about it like this, it took 60 years for the strings to pull that wood into a bowed up shape on this top. It caused cracks in the top, it caused all kinds of problems, but it bowed everything, including the braces. To naively think you're just going to, like, say, humidify it or do something crazy like that and get this come back into shape, you're dreaming. You're dreaming all day long. And even if you could, like, you know, humidify it and press it back into shape and then let it set that way, how long do you think it would take before the strings pull it back into that quote-unquote memory that it has? Because it's already found that shape and it likes that shape. In my opinion, and in all of the years I've been doing this, the only way I've been able to guarantee it'll take a new shape is to fix it mechanically. To my eye's pretty sensitive when it comes to looking at this stuff. You know, I've been doing it a long time. This side here is far worse. The bass side is far worse than the treble side. From that standpoint, I could work on the bass side of this and straighten that out. I probably could get away with that, but I don't know if I want to just do it halfway like that or just do the whole thing since I'm doing it anyway. So those are the thoughts that are going through my head, and I'm just trying to figure it out. I'm sure many of you are screaming at the screen on what you would do, but it's just not a simple decision. Partly because of cost, partly because of the vintage nature of the instrument. All those things have to be considered. Here's always my bottom line. I don't care if it's a vintage instrument or the most valuable instrument in the world. If it don't work and it don't play and you can't use it, what good is it? I mean, you can set it on a shelf and look at it. What's that do for you? So, with that in mind, I guess I'm going to tear into it. And I guess, like, you know, my theory is always do the easy thing first. So because of that, and because this side is far worse than this side here is almost fine. Draw a line across here. This section is fine. This section is not. So I guess I'm just going to work on this section, and let's see where that takes us. Okay, I just did some more checking. When I check it like this brace is fine. When I get over to here, this brace is, I mean, the top has got a 1/8 inch sag in it right here in the middle. From here to where it's almost flat. I mean, there's a teeny bit of a sag here, I ain't gonna lie, but it's very minimal. In fact, I can press down and make it go away with very little effort. Here, it would take quite a bit of effort to press that out. So really, I've even refined it more that we're talking this area right here is the problem area. So I guess that's where I'm going to start. I'm going to start on this stuff here. This brace here is really of very little value because they've drilled a hole in it. It's got a dowel pin through it. I think I'm just going to get rid of that. I'm pretty sure I'm going to get rid of this because I don't think that's going to help me at all because this is pulled up right here really badly. You can see the angle of that better when I show it like that. It's just crazy. It's nowhere near level to the top of the instrument. This is just tilted forward from all the years of pulling. So that's what we got to fix. So I'm saying everything from here in this area has got to go. and we'll build it back right. I kind of hate to take this main X brace off, but I think it really needs to come apart from this point forward. I don't think it's going to weaken it really significantly by cutting this off here. Some people would say yes it will, but it won't. I don't think at all, especially if I fit it up tight here. Anyway, enough talk, let's do it. Just trying different things to see what might work first. Might get lucky. After doing all that water yesterday, I thought maybe some of these might be softer. I think once again I'll just chisel it out of there, and that'll get rid of most of it. It's a lot easier to get rid of the rest of it once you get rid of the bulk. I know it probably looks fairly crude the way I do this, but I'm just picking lightly the little pieces that are left, and I'm just lifting them up, and they just kind of peel off, chip off. I'm not trying to take it all at once because I don't want to pry hard against the top. If you just grab these little flakes and little pieces, then you're not putting that much pressure on your top. If I tried to get all the way under there and do it, then you're really putting a lot of pressure on your top, and you could break your top. Here we got a little issue because of the dowel pin that's been stuck through there, so I'm going to peel the dowel pin off. Most of these kinds of braces are inset under each other, so I'm just cutting it off there so that I can get it out. It's looking pretty good so far. Looks like the dowel pin's going to come loose and come out of the holes, what it's looking like, and I didn't really want that necessarily to happen. Yeah, it stayed in there. So let's see if it'll, may not stay in there long, but it's in there for now. I'm pretty sure this bridge pad is inset under this brace. This brace is going to come out anyway because it's too bent to fix. And so I think I'm just going to get rid of it right now. Of course, before I do that, I want to saw this off. I want to saw it off flush with this right here. That way when I start chipping this off, it won't break anything up in here because it's already loose from there. Did you ever watch the TV show The $6 Million Man? Well, the slogan in the startup of that show was, "We can rebuild him. We can make him better." Yeah, well, that's kind of the way this is. We can rebuild this and we can make it better. I don't think it's going to be bionic when we're done, but on the other hand, it'll be solid.
Is it going to cost $6 million?
Yeah, just under that.
It's in the wind, it's in the wind, that you're leaving me again. There's no disguise, it's in your eyes, you can't fool me this time.
I'm kind of prying here, which I said I wouldn't do, but this looks like the end of this is loose, which is a good thing. Now this has not been heated up, but I'm just going to see if it'll slide in here. Probably going to have to do a little bit more than just pop it off there. I thought we might get lucky. Yeah, I think I'm going to have to heat that up to get that off. Got out my homemade bridge heater. This is my bridge heater or fretboard removal tool. I remove the bridges, bridge plates, and fretboards with this particular tool. Made from parts that I acquired mostly from McMaster Car and from eBay. If you were interested in building something like this, I show how to build my side bender on my website. There's an actual tab at the top of the screen, www.rosastringworks.com, where it will show you how to build or all the components you need for this. Now it's actually showing you how to build a side bender, but the basic technology is exactly the same. You just insert the working parts that are inside this block, you would just insert them into the upright piece of aluminum that bends your sides versus this. So otherwise it's pretty much the same. Still a little bit cool, so it's only at 300 degrees. That's getting close enough to start, but I'll wait until it gets up to around 400 at least. I'll show you what that looks like here in just a moment. Okay, it's only been about a minute or so, and it's back up, it's over 400. I've been heating the knife on the block here, which it gets red hot really fast. So I'm sure it's ready to go. Let's see if the glue is soft enough. Yep, it really is. You can just see how it slides under there now. It just more or less eats that glue up. Uh-oh, we got a problem with the top here. The top had cracked a bunch of places. I just don't want to go all the way through the top here from taking this off. Close to coming off, but it's not quite giving up the ghost yet. Again, we're underneath this brace, so that's part of my problem. May have to saw it out from under that brace, because it does actually go under the brace, which I'm not a fan of installing them that way. As you can tell, it didn't help anything by installing it that way, and if anything, it weakened the brace. You know, so to me, it's counterproductive to do it this way. Now I know it's Martin, and you know everything Martin does is perfect, but in this case, I don't think so. Everybody's got an opinion, you just heard mine. I'm afraid I'm going to bust out a big chunk of the top here if I am not careful. There it is. We popped it out of there. We did lose a pretty good piece of wood right here that I'll put back in there. It'll fit right back in that hole, I think. So other than that, we did pretty good. I zoomed it in a little bit there, and I'm going to see if I can pry up this one fairly large chunk of wood that came out with this pad. Yeah, it came off pretty cleanly. And so that's the pad side. So it should go back in here like this. And it fits in like so. Let's see if we can make it fit in there as tight as possible, and then we'll glue all this back and clamp it. There's a lot of little cracks and problems in this area, and it even goes back in here. I think I'm going to use, I don't like to use the CA glue, but I think that's what I'm going to use because it'll penetrate all these little feathered out cracks and things, and then I'll clamp it in place after I do that because I really want this to be solid. I do think the CA glue will hold it. I do think it's the best choice in this particular case, though I much prefer to use the wood glue when I can. There's a lot of cracks here. Just, it's more like splinters. And I don't think I could get the wood glue into all of them. But this stuff, it goes everywhere. And it sucks into the crack. You can see it actually just suck down in the crack. That part is really good with this glue. I think I'm just going to hold it like this. I'm going to put plastic on both sides and squeeze it between my fingers. Got it zoomed in there so it's hard to tell, but that's what I'm doing is I'm pushing plastic on both sides to keep from gluing my fingers to it. I'm just going to give it a couple of minutes here. In fact, I'm feeling quite a bit of heat, so I think it's setting up. And now that it's had a little time, I'll spritz it with the accelerator, which kind of cements it in place. I think that fixed that whole area there. Okay, now we just got a lot of cleanup. I'm basically just going to be scraping all of this whole area and just get it down to bare wood. I'm not going to show a lot of that because I'm just going to use various and sundry scrapers to do it. My old scraper here, this is after it's been sharpened for the last 25 years or so. This is how big it used to be. You can see how much I've sharpened it, and you can tell also by this used to be round, so it's been sharpened a lot. It's kind of my scraper of choice, especially on anything that's critical, delicate, whatever. I'm going to try to get rid of all remnants of the glue and the old brace and stuff. Like where there's more glue here and there's more just creeping crud on the top, just anything. Anything that's there that shouldn't be there, the scraper pretty much will get rid of it. It does a very, very fine shaving. I'm shaving off that last little bit of that brace that was there. That's really smooth now. It'll even shave the end of this dowel pin out, or it'll pull the dowel pin out of the hole, one of the two. Hey, I'm really glad we took that out. I haven't measured it yet, but I'll let you see it as I see it. Look how much of a curve there is there. It's a lot. More than it probably looks like on camera. 1/8 of an inch is 125 thousandths. Pretty sure this is going to go under there all the way. You know, it's too long to make it work well, but I can get it up to almost to the 150 thousandths mark. And it's awkward. I'm pretty sure it's 150 thousandths deep right there, which is more than 1/8 of an inch. And this side over here is pretty much flat. So, to give you some idea as a basis of comparison. The other thing about a scraper is when you learn how to use them is you can get into the tightest spots and pull the wood away. See, like, there's almost no other way to get in there. I mean, you could use a chisel, sort of, but you can't get it quite as smooth with a chisel as you can with a scraper. We got quite a bit of glue buildup right here. And again, I think we've got a lot of wood splitting here. There's wood split in different directions. I'm not even sure what caused that, but once again, I think I'm going to go to the CA glue because I can see down in there's a crack here, and this will glue it. It'll suck it right down in there. In fact, I'm going to pump it like this. I can see the pumping action moving the glue in and out. We will wipe off the excess glue, force it down in there like that. Yeah, I can see the glue squeezing out as I'm holding it there. If you don't spritz it too soon, it won't turn white on you. If you spritz it right away, it'll turn white and make a mess. Because I was having that problem all the time. Everything I would spray would turn white. I've learned if you just let the glue set for 10 seconds and then you spray it, you're fine. Yeah, that's much better already, I can tell. That was really a broken spot in here. It was fairly large, but now it's solid. And I can scrape it better because it's solid now. It was almost unscrapable before. I think we're doing some good things to this. My hope is that when we're done with this, it'll last pretty much another lifetime. I was wanting to check this to see if I still want to take this brace out also, and I'm pretty sure I do. Yeah, I do. It's just going to want to keep holding that shape, and I don't want anything to hold that shape anymore. So here we go.
Before you up and leave me, there's something you should know. Just sit right down beside me, just once before you go. Remember when we first met, we had a love so fine. We vowed we love each other until the end of time.
Once again, look here and you can see the huge amount of wood they cut out of this brace. That's why this is so weak. It was cut out of that one too. It's just, you're just weakening your braces when you do that. It's not a good idea. So if I was you and you're building a guitar, don't copy this design. Don't copy digging, cutting your braces out. That's what they're there for. They're there for strength. And when you start monkeying with these, especially these big X braces, these are really your main strength. And yeah, they've cut a lot of this one away. And not to mention they've already, scalloped it really thin, and then they cut all that away. Feel free to disagree with me. I can't force you to be correct. It's a little cumbersome getting that last little bit of brace out of there. Go to my trusty finger plane. It always works. It never lets me down. There's such a bowl here. I feel like I'm actually carving the inside of a mandolin. That's how much of a bowl there is. I'm starting down the hill here, and I come through, and then I'm coming back up here. I mean, it's that much of a bowl.
It's in the wind, it's in the wind, that you're leaving me again. There's no disguise, it's in your eyes, you can't fool me this time.
Here's another place where the top is split, cracked in here. Once again, it's such a fine crack. I'm going to use the CA glue because it even goes on up through. I can see it wicking up through here, so I'm just going to go ahead and use that pretty much all through there, pushing around to wick it around. I'm going to cleat all of this stuff too wherever there's long cracks, but I'm not going to do that until just before I'm ready to put it back together. It's hard to explain what I'm talking about here on these cracks. They're not the cracks that are going this way. I'm talking about actual, like if you took a knife and stuck it back in this thing this way, it's like the crack goes this way across here. I don't know what would have caused that. It almost seems like it had to have been some pretty heavy trauma. Probably when they were taking the bridge off at one time, they might have got a little rambunctious. I guess I'm about ready to start putting braces back in this. So I'll have to make up some braces. I'm going to pick out some very select spruce that will have strong properties. We're going to have to glue this in here in such a way that it folds this flat, because it's just not flat at all right now. It's really deep. It's every bit of 150 thousandths. So we've got to take all of that bow out of that. And you might think, well, that couldn't be that hard on something this thin. It's harder than you think, especially with just a small brace. I think what I'm going to do is make my brace a little oversized, glue it in there, clamp it, let it set for a good 24 hours minimum, and maybe longer because I'm going to be leaving for a long weekend. And that will help start getting a new memory in this top. That's what it's going to take. It's going to take a significant change to bring this back. Well, I went in search of the perfect piece of wood, and I believe I found it. It's just as perfectly straight grained as it can be, just as straight as it could possibly be. You can see that there's no run out on the edge here. You can see how little bit of a run out. There's a little discoloration and a little bit of discoloration, but it's very minor. If you look down the actual grain lines, they just continue. They don't run off to the side or anything. All of that makes a difference in strength. I've left this plenty large. In other words, I've left it 5/8 of an inch tall and about 20 thousandths thicker than the original, which is not that much thicker, but every little bit matters on something like this. You can see that we've got a long way to press it there. It doesn't look that far in the camera, at least not in the lens I'm looking in right now, but I can tell you that's quite a bit of pressing. And that's why I want this brace to be exceptionally strong, and I'm going to glue it and press it into place, and with a lot of clamps. There'll be quite a few clamps along this, and I'll let it sit that way, like I said, for several days. Hopefully the wood will decide that it's in that shape now and stay in that shape so that I can carve this back down nice and thin. I will probably do the same thing here. I may go ahead and get that one ready and clamp them both at the very same time, and I think I will. That'll just help strengthen this whole area. If I could, I would do the plate at the same time, but I think that's biting off a little bit too much. So I'm just going to concentrate on these two. I think we're ready to put the glue to it. Now I went ahead and made another one of these for this brace here, and it's made out of the same exact piece of wood, so it's really straight and perfect also. It's not quite as large as this one, but it doesn't need to be. So here we go.
I know you found another who wants your love so fine, but darling, please don't leave me. Just take a little time. You know I love you, darling.
Those clamps will move it back into place, that's for sure.
So won't you please consider our life and hopes and dreams. It's in the wind, it's in the wind that you're leaving me again. There's no disguise, it's in your eyes. You can't fool me this time.
Well, technically I still see a little bit of a low spot right here in between these two clamps, believe it or not. So I'm going to move this clamp closer. Now I'm getting squeezed out all the way from one clamp to the other, but not so much down here. So I'm going to have to get yet another longer clamp to get in here. I mean, this is really that warped, believe it or not. You'd think one or two clamps would be enough. It's not. It's really severely warped. Well, there's what it looks like with all the clamps. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 clamps on this. It's been nearly a week since I was able to work on this 0018 Martin. This is all dried and set up really well. You can probably see how flat the top is already just from these new braces that I've put in there. So I do think that was the right thing to do. Some people might argue, oh, this got to have a small radius to it. No, I don't think so. This brace that's in here looks perfectly flat, this one. But everything else on this side was really curved. It looks real good now. The sides match. You know, it's had plenty of time to cure and get hard. I'm debating on whether I want to carve this first or go ahead and put in this, bridge pad first. I'm kind of leaning towards putting in the bridge pad first to give it that additional strength before I even carve this down. I'm also debating on whether I want to replace this brace since they drilled a hole through it also, but I don't think that's really that consequential. So I don't think that's a big deal. I'll probably just leave that. Anyway, I definitely think I'm going to start right here and put this in. And I'm going to make a fairly good sized bridge plate because I do think this thing's been through the ringer enough times. It's got so many breaks, chips, cracks. I think, more is better in this case. It'll make it last pretty much forever. Went to my pile of Paduke and found this piece that was a cutoff from making a guitar. The grain is running the proper way. It's not too thick. Honestly, I don't know how thick it is, but let's just check it and see. It is 112 thousandths, which is just about perfect. So I think it was meant to be. So what I'm trying to do here is kind of get it perpendicular to the grain lines. I want to make it as large as I can make it pretty much, and that's just about how big I was going to make it, and this piece just fits the bill perfectly. So I think we're in good shape. I'm going to just draw the lines on it up on the top side here that I can put a straight edge to. That ought to fit it pretty well, so I'll go over and cut that out on the bandsaw. Well, I've got this piece made. It fits it pretty much like a glove. Just want to point out the differences. The old bridge plate went right through here and very small. wasn't really a high quality piece of wood. Yeah, I mean, it was a piece of spruce, but on the other hand, that's a very soft piece and it's going to let it pull up really easily. This is a very resonant piece of wood. It's too small to really tone it, but it's got a nice click to it, and you know it's going to produce good sound, so I'm not worried about that. The additional things that I'm doing is I'm extending it past the back here a little bit, about, I would say a little more than an 1/8 inch, maybe up to a quarter. It's not quite a 1/4 inch. But I'm also expanding from here up into this corner area. This seam goes all the way through here. The seam has been cracked a number of times, I can tell. So this will strengthen all of that and make it really solid. I think it's the right thing to do. Just because I can, I'm taking this straight edge razor blade here and just scraping this again to just make sure there's no glue bumps or any other obstructions, and right up against the brace I glued in here to make sure that the glue is not, popped out in the way. Feels nice and smooth. By putting the lid on this, let's see if the glue actually works. It did work, I'll be darned. Spread this around. I try not to make a big mess here, like especially around these little holes where it doesn't run through and make a big mess. And as I've said so many times, you just don't rush this part. You want 100% coverage. Every single space matters. And this is not perfectly flat in here, but I'm hoping that we can flatten it out by putting a caul on this and squeezing it all together. So I'll get that all set up and show you what that looks like. I believe that took care of it really well. I put a thick caul here, and that didn't quite fit up into the corner up here, so I put a small little triangle piece of wood up here, and the glue squeeze out is coming out on the inside in there a lot. So I know it's working really well. I put a large flat board here that I sanded really smooth and beveled all the edges so the edges wouldn't make a dent on this. And it's a softwood anyways, plenty strong enough to keep this flat. I've got clamps pretty darn tight. That'll set that way for the next several hours and we'll move forward. Well, while that top is sitting drying, I suppose I might as well start on this mess. I mean, if you would like to clean this up, I would think you would be the person that would like rope burns. This does not look like a fun job to me. There's a lot of glue there. I used water on the top to get rid of that glue, and I may try that on this too because it looks like the same kind of glue, but it's risky in a way because you're getting this all wet and it can expand and bust and crack and do all kinds of problems. Scraping it off works pretty well, but it's really hard to get down in here and scrape, and especially with the way my hands are these days. Yeah, almost anything else would create as many problems as it would solve. These cracks that are in here, they put these big things on here to fix that, I guess, but I really can't bear having this all in here. It just looks terrible to me. I think I'm going to take out that stuff also and see if we can't find a little better way to, or at least a less obstructive way to do it. It just looks like a major effort here, so might as well get started. I'll show you what I do first. I touched it with a scraper, and it does work, but this is some really thick glue. I don't know if you can see how thick it is there, but it's, I don't know, 50 thousandths thick, which is quite a bit. It's over 1 millimeter thick, or like I like to say, 1.25 millimeters. Or 1.25 millimeter if that suits you better. Yeah, it's bad. This wood is so brittle. Well, I already learned that when I took the top off, how brittle these sides and this type of wood is. Mahogany's a hard wood, but it's a soft, hard wood, and it gets very dried out and very brittle. And this is old, and it's incredibly brittle. That's part of my conundrum here is trying to figure out what to do. Scraping wouldn't be a terrible option, but it's down in this hole and it's hard to, you can't get a good angle on it to scrape. But the scraping might be the fastest. Maybe I'll kind of do a combination. I'll try to scrape what I can and then take water to the rest maybe. I can't imagine anybody being this sloppy with their glue. That just doesn't make sense to me.
It's in the wind, 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 you win again, you win again, it's in the wind.
Well, this is going to be a very, very slow, tedious process, so I'll make progress and show you the progress along the way. As you work on these things, you start thinking about different things and wondering why, and wondering about various and sundry aspects. And what's really ironic about this is where they put in all these braces up here, they didn't do a real good job. There's extra glue here, but nowhere near as much extra glue as back here. And there's no sign of having done anything back here. In other words, they didn't glue in any extra pieces or anything back here, yet all the glue is back here. By the way, I don't know if you can see it, but the glue is all the way up here on the sides too. It's just really a nightmare. I decided to go to my regular old scraper. It seems to be working pretty well. Yeah, it's amazing how the scraper will pull that right off of there. It does a good job. The only negative of that is you can't get it everywhere because of the sides and the other braces and things that get in the way. So let me vacuum that out and see where we're at, because it's difficult to tell what needs to be cleaned. You can see it knocked out the majority of that in there. It's still real tedious, like just getting into corners like that, it's really hard to do. Well, I'll keep working on this and show you the progress as we advance. My friends, very often we'll say something like, well, that was better than nothing, I mean, like, in other words, you put something in there and you think, well, that was better than not doing anything. No. In this case, I'm pretty sure not doing anything would have been far better than what they did here. This is pretty bad. I'm fairly sure they glued threw all this down in here because there are some fine line cracks in here. And I think they just, through the sound hole, just dumped this glue in here thinking that would seal these cracks. Sort of, kind of, to some degree, it might have done a little bit of that, but yeah, it just created way more problem than it fixed. It's been several days since I worked on this, so I thought I better get after it. We're carving the braces down now using my trusty little finger plane. This used to be easy. It's not easy anymore. Kind of wish I'd have carved this down before I put this little plate in here, because my thumb hits that plate when I'm going this way. I'm going to leave the brace just a little bit hefty compared to the original. Not a lot, but every little bit helps. Since this top pulled into that warped shape, it will want to tend to do that again, but with these new braces, that should stop it. I left my braces, just for the record, I left them a little teeny bit wider. My idea is to leave them slightly taller, but to carve them thinner from the base up. That way they'll be really strong. I'm not going to scallop them near as much as this. I'll scallop them a little bit just to give it the look, but I'm not going to scallop them way down like that, because that's where it lost all the strength. Once wood finds a shape it likes, it wants to go back to that, so you have to fix it mechanically. You just can't wish it away. It won't go away, and it won't stay away. This thick soft carpet is good for carving into, because it makes a natural deflection. Yeah, it wiggles some, but it stops it from sliding. and it also won't scar anything around the edging, where if you put this up against something hard, it could potentially make a problem.
He cut me, his song got under my skin, he held me, he knew me over again, he moved me, he knew that he had, how can I find words for that?
The chisel seems to be carving this pretty well. I didn't really expect it to carve that well, but it's working pretty well. And that really a lot depends on the piece of wood you're dealing with too. Some pieces of wood just like to dig in and chip off. This is a very high grade of wood, and it's carving pretty well.
He got me just like the north wind. He left me with nowhere to begin. How he moved me, I know that he did. How can I find words for him?
Alright, I'm going to put a little bit of that scallop look back into it, just so that it sort of matches, but I'm not going to go near as scalloped as it was. Of course, years from now, someone will look at this and go, wonder why they didn't scallop it like the other ones. They sure didn't do this very well. But I'm doing it on purpose. Well, I'm going to tap on it now and see if I can get any tone out of this at all. Honestly, I'm not sure how much tone I'll get out of it with the finish on there, but we'll see. Not bad. You can hear it that long, so that's pretty good. It's not bad. So we haven't heard it any with our bracing. Wanted to make sure though, you know, because if it's not vibrating, then your bracing and things are going to be too big. I don't know how well the camera can hear it. I know it's difficult, but see if you can hear the notes. I have to get the light out of the way. Got a nice bassy sound. Sounds pretty good. There's a little teeny bit of rattle I'm hearing, but that's from these braces that are loose up in here, and we got to fix that too. I'm just looking if my part down here that I'm doing, if that's finished, I think I'm ready to maybe sand those smooth. Just looking at them to see if I see any flaws or imperfections. They look pretty good. I want to get them as small as I feel I can get them while they're still strong. I think we're doing pretty well. I think I can get a little wood out of here in this area.
I'm quiet.
Well, you have to know when you're done, and I guess I'm done. So let's sand it.
I'll get through summer somehow. He moved me. He knew that he had. How can I find words for that?
Well, there's what she looks like up close. As good as I was hoping for, which is seldom and when you're doing this kind of work. So that's as good as I was expecting it to be, and you can't really get it much better than that. The bridge plate is going to add a lot. The only thing I'm debating on is if I want to put another little piece of gauze right here. They had one in here before, and you can see it. It's a little dark thing. I'm thinking of just doing that to tie my piece into the X there. So I may do that.
He got me just like the north wind. He left me with nowhere to begin. Oh, he moved me. I know that he did. How can I find words for him?
not exactly real neat, but what I'll do is I'll let that dry and then I'll come in there with X-Acto knives and stuff and clean up the little bit of straggly parts that are sticking out there and just clean it up the best I can. That looks like it locks it together pretty well, so that's about all we can do. While the little gauze thing is drying, I'm looking at things, and you know, there's a lot of cracks on this that go way down through here. This is a double crack, so they go side by side, and so you know, this brace will hold a lot of that, but in between here, I think we could use something else. Now, normally I would put one caul on each crack, but these cracks are so close together, it would be better to put a little cleat that would go all the way across both of them. So I'm just approximating the length that I need here. You want to have enough left over on each side so that there's enough for the glue to grab to. You know, otherwise it doesn't do much good. So that's about the right length there. This back side here is pretty smooth. I'm just gonna sand it to get it's kind of a glaze almost. It's, you know, I want the glue to stick to it really well. This is the ultimate glue here, and to me this is fine to use for something like this. I don't ever want this to come loose. So it's not a bad choice, really. I chose that location a little bit more because down here, the crack is waning out and it's not near as bad as it is up in here, so I wanted to get it up in the worst area of the crack, at least what I think looks like it's the worst area of the crack. Put a little more glue on there. It seems to have soaked in quite a bit. My preference is to always clamp them. I think clamps do the best job on holding things like this. There's lots of methods. You could use all kinds of other methods, but I really do prefer clamps. I think they're the tried and proven, true, absolute, 100%, you know it's going to work. You can put the appropriate amount of pressure on it. I know about how much I want to put on there, and I've got it on there. Now I think I'm going to put 2 cleats in this area. Again, they're going to be a little longer because they're going to span 2 different things, 2 different cracks. Mark it here about how long I want and make 2 of them. Once again, I'll sand the edge that's going to be glued. Well, you can see all the cleats I've put in here. This was the worst crack down through here. I may look at this some more and see if I need more, but I think this is probably sufficient. This center seam had cracked and it was fairly open, so I decided to go ahead and, even though this is just a very short distance, I decided to go ahead and cleat between the bridge pad here and this brace, just on that center seam. And then finally there was one more crack right through here. The reason I cleated this one was mainly because it was kind of an open crack and they had filled it and glued it, but I figured that now is the time to support that from the inside. Typically I only cleat things if I think there's stress on them, and this here is difficult to say if there's stress on this or not. Because it had twisted so badly over the years, I feel like there may be some extra stress that we could experience here. So I'm going to, you know, just go on the err on the safe side and go ahead and cleat it. If it was a spot that, you know, had no stress in it and was glued properly, and see, I don't know how these were glued, someone else did that. If I had glued it properly and didn't feel there was any stress, I probably wouldn't even cleat it because the glue's very strong. Who knows how this was done, and that's why I'm cleating all this. That should help all of that. All right, so now I need to figure out about gluing these braces back here that are loose. In order to glue them back, you really need to get rid of any of the old glue that's under there. That's the hardest part of all this. So you got to find something flat that you can get in there and scrape pretty good. You know, you'll never get it all, but you at least want to get it flat and get rid of as much glue as you can. I don't really feel much in there. I imagine there's something there though. this is one of those places where you really can't even get the X-Acto blade in there very well because it's so flat. The best way to clean these things up when you got clamps on here is just to take a paintbrush, dip it in water, dry most of the water off, and then just sweep in there. And you can sweep under your clamp in different places. Gets rid of a lot of that glue that would be there and you'd have to chisel off later. I know this brace is loose too, so we'll work on it next. I don't know if you can see it or not, but the knife goes all the way under the brace here. Again, I try to use the edge of the blade to grab any loose glue or anything. Again, I don't really feel anything, so it's probably fine. I'm starting to see the glue working through the other side there. That's what I like to see rather than putting it in from the other side. I like to see the glue work in.
You got me just like the north wind. You left me with nowhere to begin. How you moved me, I know that it do. How can I find words for him?
As far as I can tell right now, that's everything. Maybe not. Looks like maybe we got some looseness on this end too. I'll be darned. I didn't think that was loose, but it is. It's not as bad as this side, but it's loose. You can probably see that I've cleaned this area here of the glue. It's left a stain, but the glue is gone. What I did was I wet it down with a warm water, and then I just take an X-Acto knife, the round bladed one, and just scrape it off. And just scrape and scrape and then wash and then scrape and scrape and wash and scrape and scrape. It's quite a process actually. It takes quite a while. But at least all that glue is off of there now. There's still that same amount of glue in here. I'm not going to worry about every little place because there's just too many places, but I'm getting the bulk of it out. As you may recall, it was all over this whole back area here. So I've got all of that out, but it's a little harder to do on these sides. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that. I'll briefly show you my process. I take this wet rag here and I just wash it first because hide glue is water soluble. It will soften up with water. If you just kind of let it get good and saturated like this, then it will scrape off pretty well. I don't know if that's enough yet or not, but that's scraping pretty good. But you can see there it does scrape once it gets wet. And then you just wet it back down again. And you just keep doing that. And believe it or not, it takes probably a dozen iterations of that to get it all off of there. I'm getting most of it off, at least the bulk of it that just looks horrible. Well, there's a look at both sides cleaned out as good as I can get them cleaned out. You know, even as down to wood as that is, when you wet that down, it's still sticky. And I was just making the remark to Caleb a moment ago that sticky doesn't necessarily mean it's good glue. I mean, a lollipop is sticky, and if you put a lollipop in between, like, something, it's going to stick it together. It just won't hold, That's kind of the way this stuff is. It's very sticky, very tacky, but it just doesn't hold. I mean, it holds pretty dang well. And for the time period back when ox carts were great, then it was a great glue. But it just needs to be done away with now, and we need to move on. I just took all the clamps off this. It's been setting a little over 2 hours. That's plenty long for that glue to set up. I'm going to now try to trim up all of these cleats to make them look nice. They're just square as I glue them in there. And then what I do is I bevel off the edges like this. It's just a finishing touch is really all it amounts to. You don't absolutely have to do this, but it sure makes them look a lot nicer. You bevel off all the corners, almost down to the guitar surface. Took a couple of seconds there to sharpen this chisel up. You know, they stay pretty sharp, but when you put a fresh edge on them, they really do cut a lot better. Especially when you're cutting like this, in grain like this, it just cuts it so much easier. Trimming up this gauze, not going to trim it up all that much, just a little bit here and there. Apparently it's not quite as dry as I thought that would be. May have to put a little more glue on it in a place or two there, just to stick it back down a little bit. I got all the extra parts off that I wanted off. Now I think I'll just put a little bit more glue on it. I'm just using Elmer's glue for this. It works pretty good for this. It's painted on over that whole gauze area there again. I think I've got the cleats trimmed up well enough. I'll just give it one more inspection and then I may be ready to glue this back together. Well, looking at it closer here, there's a spot right here that like I was telling you, this was a pretty big crack. There's a lot of glue that squeezed through here. That crack's pretty good size. I know this cleat is kind of holding it here, but it might not hurt to put one there. I think I will because it's a little bit deformed there. It's not perfectly flat, and by putting a cleat on there, that'll help flatten it a little bit probably and just make it stronger. So I'll do that. So this cleat is square, but I nicked the corner of it off to have it go up in here a little bit better because that brace is a little bit in the way. Need a little bit more of this corner off of here, I think. In fact, it's probably just easier to do it with the chisel. This is probably overkill, probably doesn't really need this, but on the other hand, the perfect time to do it, and it won't hurt anything either. And we'll let that dry now too, and I'll inspect the sides while that's drying. The truth is, I actually broke this right around here when I was taking this apart. This thing is super brittle, and it just broke all at once. I don't know. I really don't think I, should take the whole blame because it just seemed like it was just something that you couldn't even avoid. It just wasn't doing anything out of the ordinary, really. It just decided to pop, and it did. I've got it glued back, and I'm going to cleat it on the inside what little bit I can get to. Truth is, I can't get to very much of it. It broke up underneath the kerf, and so you really can't even get to most of the area that broke on the inside. I'll just do the best I can. Well, I finally got the glue to cooperate, so now I will try to put these little cleats on this inside edge here. There's very little to cleat, to be honest. It's only like an 1/8 inch from the kerf. And I think I'll just use these little clamps to hold that because I don't know what else I could get in there very easily. I think that ought to do it. And I'll give that a while to set up. At least that'll give it a little bit of additional support where it did break down inside there. Well, it didn't really show me cutting it, but I kept cutting and cutting until I got a little tiny piece of wood to fit in that hole. And of course it's a piece of mahogany to match the rest of it. I've got it pressed down in there pretty good. I'll just use CA glue to lock it in place. And then I will try to match it with color and stuff too, although that just about made it match perfectly when I put the CA glue on it. Wow, pretty cool. I'll probably just let that set and do its thing. That almost made it disappear just in that right there. You can barely see it. Once we get this all cleaned up and buffed out, maybe even apply a little bit of finish in this area, just whatever it takes to cover up those breaks. I think they're solid. I've got them glued back, and I don't think they'll give any trouble, especially once we get the top glued back on. Everything will be pretty solid. I wish it hadn't happened, but as I've mentioned many times, when you're doing some of this kind of work, it's very destructive, and it's really easy to cause a problem, even when you're just trying to be very careful. In this particular case, I'll be honest, I was probably pushing it a little bit, but on the other hand, I didn't expect it to be anywhere near that brittle, and it was just crazy brittle. In the scheme of things, this is very minor compared to how major everything else was. We'll get it eventually.